Hi and welcome to Thriver TV, the place to break free from narcissistic abuse with quantum tools and understandings. So this week's Thriver TV show is about boundaries and our susceptibilities as a combination. And it's a follow-on from last week's Thriver TV show that Simone and I did together in Japan. And thank you for all of the comments that people made about that show. And look, I know it was a controversial show and I showed up in a very, very different way. And the reasons I did that were two reasons. And the first was I really wanted to share with you more of my authentic self, and my authentic self is fun. Thriving is such a beautiful experience when you get enough pain out of the cells of your body for well-being and joy and fun and playfulness to come through. And a lot of people in the community are experiencing that and sharing in that. And I really want to inspire you to know that that is what you've got to look forward to when you do the work in your body, and it is beautiful. However, I absolutely validate the people that are still in trauma and in pain. And I remember when I was like that, curled up in a corner and I could barely function. I couldn't listen to music because it would trigger me. It would hurt too much. I couldn't hear anybody laugh. I couldn't connect to anything that was joyful. It was too painful. So I know that there are people in the community that would have had that experience, and I really do feel for you because I know what that's like. But please know, if you do the work, you've got so much joy to look forward to. It's so important to really go for that, because I promise you're going to have it. And the other thing was, as we talked about, we really wanted you to know the ridiculousness of what happens when you're in with a narcissist, trying to get them to get it and going around in circles with the three-ring narcissistic circus, which is just crazy. So this week's show, we're going to, I really want to do something quite revolutionary, because I've talked about our susceptibility. I've done a whole series on that. And I've also talked about boundaries and done a few shows on that. I want to combine the two. And the reason I want to combine the two is because a lot of people said, can you expand on last week's show in Japan? Can you talk about it? Can you go into it in deeper detail? And I do. I really do want to do that, to help you out. But what I want you to realize is the biggest truth you can ever know about narcissistic abuse, which is recovery, that is that knowledge is not power. I cannot tell you that enough. Knowledge is not power. And there are just droves of people, and I was one of them, that knew everything to do with narcissists. I had studied and researched and got on abuse forums, and I learned everything for the 2 years that I was connected to the last 2 years of narcissist number one. And even though I knew all about narcissistic abuse, that he was high level, that there was no hope that he would get better, that I was hooked in and it was just so unhealthy, I was that emotionally invested that I just could not break away despite all of my cognitive knowledge about it. And even when I did break away and I did succeed in getting out and away from him, the obsession, the psychic binds and bonds were just that massive and that addictive that I just kept breaking no contact, and I kept going back. I just was never free. And I was never free until I stopped trying to cognitively work it out, and I came to the emotional recognition and work in my own body about it. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Because if we're just trying to do it logically, we're not getting there. Some people can, but most people never do. And that's the difference between a survivor recovery, where we might physically get away, but we never emotionally break free, and a thriver recovery, where we break free to the point where we're not obsessed, we're not hooked, we have no need to try and finalize anything emotionally with them. We don't need to get any accountability. We can just be very clear, very solid and mature, and we can move on. Now, there's a really and this was the distinct difference between the role plays last week. The first role play was all about wounded inner child Melanie, who was showing up in ways where I was handing power over. I was trying to justify, I was trying to argue, I was trying to force the narcissist, Simone, super narc, to get it. And all I was doing was granting narcissistic supply and keeping the drama going. Whereas second role play was up-leveled adult Melanie, who was a mature source in her own body, being able to easily know her rights and her truth and recognize another adult who was not accountable, not authentic and not honest, and therefore unsafe to have a relationship with, that wasn't her version of life or love, and easy to let it go, and actually a relief to let it go. Even though, of course, as we know, there might be losses, there's pain, it's never easy separating. But when we're in a solid adult container, it's as healthy as it can be. When we're in a wounded childhood container, we've got unfinished business that we're trying to play out with this person. And that's why even if we get away, that unfinished business does not let go of us. And that's what we've got to address. So I want to give you a really good example of why knowledge is not power. Let's say that the narcissist uses a defense mechanism of threatening abandonment. Now, for all of us as children growing up, there are four main things that are our terrors: the fear of abandonment, the fear of criticism, the fear of rejection, and the fear of punishment. And the reason we have these fears is because they threaten our source of love, approval, survival, and security. And as a child, they are precariously positioned on an adult providing them for us because we can't provide them for ourselves. We had no ability to. We were incredibly organically codependent as children. Now, if we received wounding around these issues that we've never been able to heal and resolve, and we didn't receive conscious parenting, which meant that we were able to self-partner, self-soothe, and bring these fears within ourselves up to a grown-up, adult, mature container to know that we are our own source of love, approval, survival, and security, and able to generate that with the unlimited resources of life, not specific people that we're codependently hooked on. If we never got to that point of that self-generative power, we are going to assign somebody else as our source of self. So we're going to, and if we had parents that were wounded and unconscious, and many of us did, because they were parented unconsciously, well then they didn't have the goods. They didn't have the inner goods to help us grow up our own inner goods. And therefore, the patterns have just continued. And we again are assigning somebody else to fix it for us and to rewrite our childhood scripts. We're choosing partners, but unconsciously we're choosing wounded people to replay what we did with our parents so that we can hopefully have our parents do it differently this time. All of that equals how to lose. So let's say we have another adult in our life who is projecting onto us, they're a wounded child as well, who is projecting onto us the threat of abandonment, the fear of abandonment, and we're triggered into this panic of literally, it's an emotional survival panic, it's an emotional survival program, the fear of abandonment, because it's threatening our inner identity, our source of love, approval, security, and survival if this person leaves us. So let's say it's a 3-year-old wound and we are triggered into cortisol and adrenaline, and when that happens, we are in fight or flee, which is very primitive, it's very childish, and literally physically physiologically, the front of our brain has closed off to us. We don't have access to it. And the front of our brain is about wisdom, solution, working things out, bigger picture, seeing the wider, deeper truths. The truth sets it's free. It's access to higher understandings and solution and maturity. Now, when the front of our brain is closed off, we're thrown into the back of our brain. All we have is fight or flee, where we're going to feel like we want to attack back, or we want to run away, or we want to plead, or we want to cry, or we want to scream. We're going to act like a child when we're in a survival program, which means we're going to hand power over. We're reacting to life instead of responding to life. And rather than being able to take control of our life, we are controlled by things outside of ourselves. And that's what has happened. Now, that 3-year-old regressed back into all of that is not going to hear logical information such as, well, page 127 of that book described this process that the narcissist is doing right now, which means that I'm being threatened with abandonment and the narcissist will do A, B, C, and D, which means I have to respond with E, F, and G. The 3-year-old child, or a child at 5 or 7 or 8 or 9 in a survival program, will not hear that. And that is why you cannot logically, cognitively talk yourself out of an emotional, regressed, unhealed wound that's been triggered. This is why knowledge isn't helping people. And I really, really want you to get that, because I challenge anybody to learn all the knowledge you can and be in that moment and pull yourself up with it. And the reason we can't, neuroscientists such as Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza are proving that when we're triggered, 95% of the nerve ends of our brain and our body, and also the emotional intelligence in our heart, research that, it'll blow you away, because it is so much more powerful than what's going on in our brain. All of that is fired up, 95% of it. You have 5% to work with cognitively, logically. That's like trying to stop an elephant stampede with a herd of ants. It's never going to work, and it doesn't work. So this is what we're really dealing with. Let's have a look at the defense mechanisms and what's really, really going on for us. So the first narcissistic defense mechanism, all right, now that one, I'm doing that thing. Now you know about my secret, my trick. Okay, I'm working out where I'm up to. All right, so the first one is avoidance, which is about minimalizing your experience. And Simone said to me, she said to me, you know, you're overreacting, you're oversensitive, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. So, and I hooked in. Now we're going to hook into that stuff when we have the beliefs such as, I'm not valid, I'm unimportant. So what happened is we didn't have opinions and rights as children. They were shut down. We were told our feelings were unimportant. And this was really, really common because our parents came from logical, IQ intelligence, understanding, and nothing about emotional intelligence. Feelings were, you know, we were told not to feel. Distract yourself, do something else, don't think about it, don't feel that. So of course our feelings have been minimalized since a child. So when somebody does that to us, we're going to be triggered, it's going to hurt us, we're going to fight back, we're going to hand over narcissistic supply until we up level and we heal that stuff. And we reorganize and we reprogram those beliefs to, I am valid, I am worthy. And then the irony is we don't even need a specific person to reflect that back because we already are. And if they don't, we just know that they're not a match for us. Okay, and the pain's gone on that. So the second defense mechanism was ignorance, which is denial. And that was about, you know, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? That's what Simone said to me. Now, if we get hooked into that, it's very likely we've got beliefs such as, I'm not heard. And wow, is this a huge one? I'm not heard. Big. That's that silent scream of nobody hears me. Nobody's there for me. Nobody's got my back. I'm not heard. And it's huge. It's a huge one with people that have been abused, and it's a huge one with people as children, and it's a huge one with people that have been shut down. It's an extension on from I'm not valid. And what we have to realize if we're running that program of I'm not heard is we've got to stop trying to force people to hear us. Narcissists don't hear us. They've got their own agendas, their own wounds, and they are terminally self-involved. They don't hear other people. They don't have the ability to hear other people. So these sorts of wounds is what brings these things as a reality co-creatively into our experience, so that we can have these unconscious wounds revealed to us so that we can heal them and we can set ourselves free. Now, this one was huge for me. I'm not heard. And in my development, what I realized, what we all need to realize, is that how we show up co-creates more of our wounds. So what I used to do is I used to over-explain or justify or argue a point rather than just stating it, or I'd show up nagging or whining, and do things that would actually switch people off from hearing me. So I really want you to think about that, because when we're in a wound, we're actually got a blind spot. We can't actually see how we're creating more of that wound, how we're actually generating more of it in our situations. But when we start healing them, we show up completely differently, and we stop doing that. And what happens is when we've healed that trauma of I'm not heard from childhood, how we show up is much more confident and much more direct in our own body and in our own expression. And then when people don't hear us, if they're abusive, well, we don't care. It's just like, well, that's not a match for me. That's not healthy for me. And with more normal people, if they don't hear us on occasion, it's like, okay, well, you've got your own stuff going on and you're just a bit absorbed with that at the moment. That's okay. I don't need you to hear me. Or we're like, well, you know, you can have another opinion. It's all right. We don't have to agree on everything. You don't have to hear me, because we already feel self-validated and we're not so hungry for people to hear us in order for us to have our own inner identity. We've already got an inner identity that's solid and whole and healthy on this topic. And then ironically, because we don't have all of that restriction and trauma, you know, on it, we have all of this beautiful space where people just start hearing us and gravitating to our message and who we are. And I know for myself, when I first started talking about narcissistic abuse recovery as a thriver model and revolutionizing the old victim model, absolutely, there were people that did not hear that message. You know, there were abuse forums up in arms. I was demonized as I was, you know, blaming victims, and just all this stuff went down. But I just was really solid and true in my beliefs and my expression. And I didn't need specific people or groups to validate me, and I didn't need to fight with them to change their mind. And what happened is, you know, thousands of people and so many specialists and people started getting on board, and they heard my message, which has just been wonderful. But I know none of that would have happened if I hadn't have healed that childhood wound of not being heard. So on to the next one. And the next one is the defense mechanism of playing tit for tat. So that's the projection. And that's what Simone did last week when she said, well, what about what you said about me in the past? Now, if we suffered as children those feelings and those beliefs of being persecuted and we're wrong and we're bad, and you know, if we had the sort of parenting that wasn't able to separate the act out and say, well, that was inappropriate, rather our identity, like, you know, you're bad, you're defective, we were shamed and blamed, and we took on that dark, insidious energy of shame. which is, you know, really quite destructive. And also too, if we suffered the conditional love of, you know, if you've done something wrong, well then you're at threat of losing love, approval, survival or security, well then we'll be triggered. We'll be triggered in a tit for tat, and we'll play straight into it, and we'll fight back, and we'll try to prove why that was different and why we weren't wrong, or how that was resolved, or how you got that last time and now you're bringing this up again. You know, we're back in that wound of persecution, rather than going, oh well, that's just a tactic, I'm not going there with you. So that's that one. So the next one is allies, real or fabricated. And now we're getting into the territory of triangulation, smear campaigns and abuse by proxy, which are tools that narcissists use readily. Virtually all of them will do it to some extent or to really big extent. And this one is all to do with when we don't have a sense of a solid inner approval and we're needing approval from outside of ourselves. We're going to really be triggered and hooked into this stuff, and we're going to feed it a lot of fuel. First narcissist in my life, I fell for that massively. I was hugely triggered, incredibly emotionally invested to try to protect my reputation and not have family and friends and associates and authorities believe all this bad stuff about me. The more I fought back with my wounded self, the worse I looked, the worse it got, the more damage happened to every area of my life, until I finally realized in my awakening that this actually had nothing to do with him, that this had to do with woundedness that I'd carried since a child, of just these horrible beliefs of, unless I can change other people's mind about me, unless I can get their approval, I can never be whole, I can never be okay, and I can never be worthy. So I've been trying to do that my entire life. And then I ended up playing it out with a narcissist on a huge, huge level that was just so painful. So when I did the work inside my own body to release those original traumas and to up-level myself and release the trauma of what was happening in my life at that time, I hit a point even before anything changed. I was still getting hammered, where I was just in this massive relief of, thank goodness, now I approve of and I love myself, and I know that I'm a good person, and I don't care what actually anybody thinks anymore, because I don't need their approval. I know that I'm a really good human being with integrity, and I feel great about that. When I hit that place, that's when everything changed. And what happened was profound. The smear campaigns fell apart. People started coming to me apologizing for believing his lies in the first place. The police caught him out. The game stopped. All of the abuse by proxy just fell away. And it was the end. It was the end of the terror campaign, and it was the beginning of freedom for me. That was huge. So that's a big one for so many people in this community. And I did a whole YouTube episode on that. So look it up if you want to, smear campaigns. It will really help you out. So the next one is entitlement. And that was when Simone said, well, what about all the stuff I've done for you in the past? You know, and now you're pulling up this issue. And we're going to hook into that stuff if we suffered conditional parenting, and let's just get it straight. Please don't blame your parents. They had unconscious parenting. They did the best they could with the resources they had, and we did it as parents too, which brings me to this point. Conditional parenting can be that whole thing about, I remember I used to say to Zach, when I had no idea, when he was about 5 or 6, I used to say, well, you know, can you please clean up your room, because look at all the things I do for you. You know, as a single mother, I put food on the table. I clothe you. I look after you. I buy you things for Christmas. You know, I was saying, look at all the stuff I do for you. I was using that entitlement hook to try to guilt him into doing things for me. I knew no better. But it's so age inappropriate, and parents don't realize that with parenting, that we're actually talking to children like we would an adult, and even not healthily. That wouldn't even be healthy to say to an adult. But it's a ridiculous notion to think that a 5-year-old has even got the ability to go out and get a job and provide, you know? So of course, that shouldn't be an entitlement. That's just every child's, you know, valid right, is to have an adult provide for them and not use it as a weapon. And I had no idea, you know, since this journey, I've changed so much, gratefully. I'm so thankful for in the way that I parent, you know, my son, who's an amazing human being. And fortunately, you know, through up-leveling myself, he up-leveled so much, and so much of the damage was able to be healed, which is just wonderful. So a lot of food for thought there. But if you're going to get hit with an entitlement hook by a narcissist, if you've got a matching in a wound, you're going to react to it. You're going to fight, and you're going to be really upset by that. So the last one I want to talk about is the biggie for me. It was, look, they were all big for me, but this one was really big. And this, I said that last week. I said I could have written a book about this. So this is displeasure of your body posture. And both narcissists used to do that to me all the time, and they would get such a reaction. It was like A-grade narcissistic supply, because I'd be triggered into a massive reaction, chemical reaction to that. And what that one is about, it's actually really violating to have the feeling of somebody crawling in your skin and telling you what you're thinking and what you're feeling and why you're doing a particular thing. It's very insidious. It's very much about a psychic violation. And if we grew up and we felt that we didn't really have boundaries, like maybe we didn't have a sacred spot in our room that was, or our diary that was just ours, that we had a boundary, maybe we weren't allowed to do that. It was all violated and infiltrated. Nothing was off limits to a parent or our parents, or even a sibling. Or maybe we weren't allowed to have our own thoughts. We were always asked what we were thinking, or we were told what we were thinking. So we felt like, you know, somebody engulfed us and you know, really deeply violated us at that level. And if that's been a big deal for us, well, then somebody telling us, you know, that our body posture is off, or we're thinking this, or we're like this, is going to trigger us significantly. And what we need to understand with narcissists is any trigger that we're responding to, we're hooking in, we're handing over narcissistic supply, we're keeping those psychic toxic binds going. And what we're trying to do powerlessly is we're trying to force the narcissist to rewrite our childhood script, which doesn't work. The only way we can do that is pull away, drop the connection, and do the work inside our body. So I really hope that this has enlightened you and really given you the difference between role play 1 and role play 2, and how it's got nothing to do with learning about the defenses of the narcissist. And I promise you, you could go to my article that I posted last week, and you could try and nut out every single defense mechanism that the narcissist does, and have the logical knowledge to combat that, and it's never going to work for you. It doesn't work. So our human mind loves to formulate and work it out and have a job. All right, we like to try and think and process everything at that level. So you might be thinking now, okay, well, where do I go with this? What do I do? How do I, it makes sense, but how do I work this out? And I want you to tell you, it is ridiculously simple. This is why I'm giving away so many of my books, right? It's ridiculously simple. This is how it goes. Get out a pen and paper, sit down, close your eyes and feel into what hurts or what hurt. What were the conversations? What were the moments? What were the things that triggered you? Write them down And then once you've written them down, you've connected to the energy field of it, then all you need to do is close your eyes one at a time and feel inside, reconjure it, and check in your body. Somewhere in your body is going to light up. So it could be your heart or your solar plexus, or it's just so big, the trauma, it's all through you. What you're doing is connecting to the original trauma. That's been reactivated. That's where you need to get your answers. That's where you need to go. That's what you need to unravel and heal. That is it. All your answers are inside of you. So when that happens, you're going to go in, you're going to go, well, how old is this part of me? And then you're going to go, what's this really about? And that's how you start to make the unconscious conscious. You bring up the darkness into the light, and you mine your greatest gold from your wounds. This is the up-level promise that you're going to get to live. When you free yourself, we always thought we're freeing ourselves from them. We're not. We're freeing ourselves from ourselves. And when we do that, that's when the joy and the thriving starts and the pain stops completely. So I hope that this has really, really helped. And if you want to take this journey deeper into workshopping that I do with groups of people from all over the world, as well as a 3-hour free teleseminar that I work with you, where I'm going to show you super tools, how to get into your body, how to find these original wounds, how to be free of them forever. That's what I help people with. So you can do that by coming into my next free webinar group by clicking on the button that appears on this video. So as always, please, what else are we going to do apart from keep smiling, keep healing, and start and keep thriving? Because that's where our liberation is. So until next week, lots of love. Bye-bye.